6 months with no nanny, until the Apache woman told the rancher, "I'm here now." For 6 long months, the ranch had been unusually quiet. Not quiet in the peaceful sense, like the calm of a sunlit morning or the gentle rustle of wind through the tall grass, but quiet in a way that felt heavy and empty. Inside the ranch house, laughter had faded. The clatter of little feet had gone missing, and the smell of warm meals being prepared with care was replaced by hurriedly thrown together dinners. The children had grown restless. They wandered from room to room, bored and irritable, their small hands reaching for attention that wasn't always there. And at the heart of it all was the rancher, a man used to working with animals, land, and tools, suddenly thrust into the role of caretaker, cook, and disciplinarian, all at once. The children's former nanny had been gone for 6 months, leaving a gap that no one seemed able to fill. She had been patient, cheerful, and unflinchingly kind. A quiet, steady presence in their lives. She knew when to read a story, when to soothe a hurt knee, and when to let the children explore the wide fields surrounding the ranch under her watchful eye. But now, without her, the rancher felt lost. He was strong and capable when it came to the cattle, the fences, and the daily grind of ranch life. But children were different. Children demanded more than strength. They demanded attention, understanding, and patience, things he had never needed in such a concentrated way. He tried. Every morning he woke early to feed the livestock, check the fences, and tend to the endless work the ranch demanded. Then, when he returned to the house, he faced the children's expectant eyes. "Dad, can we go outside?" one of them would ask, tugging at his sleeve. Or, "Can you read us a story?" another would plead, voice small but urgent. He would try to comply, but the day's work weighed heavily on his shoulders. There were meals to prepare, laundry to do, and endless chores that seemed to multiply when no one was around to help. By the time the evening came, he was exhausted, and the children's energy had only grown. He felt like a man caught in a storm without a sail. The ranch house itself seemed to reflect the tension. The floors were dusty in places he hadn't noticed before. Toys were scattered across rooms, abandoned in frustration or boredom. Books lay open and forgotten, their pages fluttering in the breeze from a cracked window. Even the family dog, normally cheerful and full of energy, seemed subdued, as if it too felt the strain of the missing presence in the home. It was a house that had once been alive with order, routine, and laughter, now teetering on the edge of chaos. Neighbors would occasionally stop by, offering sympathy and advice. "You're handling it well," they'd say, not fully realizing that he wasn't. He nodded politely, grateful for the concern, but inwardly wishing for someone who could step in and simply take charge, someone who understood children as well as he understood cattle. The rancher knew there was no shame in asking for help, but he was stubborn. For years he had managed the ranch alone, proud of his ability to endure, to solve problems, and to make things work. Yet, when it came to raising children alone, he realized he had reached a limit he had never imagined. Each night, after the children were finally tucked into bed, the rancher would sit alone on the porch, staring at the endless stretch of land under the fading sunlight. The horizon glowed with shades of orange and pink, and the wind carried the faint scent of sagebrush and dry earth. It was beautiful, yes, but it reminded him of the emptiness in the house behind him. The silence inside contrasted sharply with the gentle whispers of the wind outside, and he could not help but think of how different things had been. He remembered mornings when laughter echoed through the hallways, when little hands would reach for his own, and when the house felt warm not just from the fire, but from the love that filled every corner. The children, too, were aware of the change, though they did not understand its cause. They felt it in the absence of comforting words, the lack of shared stories. and the quiet evenings that used to be filled with songs and laughter. Sometimes they would look at their father with hopeful eyes, as if trying to will him into being the parent they needed him to be. But his exhaustion, though unspoken, created a barrier he could not cross, leaving the children frustrated and confused. They missed the gentle guidance and reassurance they had once taken for granted. On particularly difficult days, the rancher found himself growing frustrated. Small accidents, a spilled cup of milk, a scraped knee, a toy broken in anger, would trigger bursts of impatience he regretted immediately. He knew he loved his children deeply, but love alone could not solve the challenges of daily life. He struggled to balance his desire to be a good father with the practical demands of running the ranch. The constant pressure weighed on him, and he began to wonder if he would ever find a solution. Yet, despite the struggles, there were moments of quiet connection that reminded him why he continued to try. The way one child's small hand would slip into his own, trusting and warm. The moments when the children laughed at something simple, a joke, or a funny face, and the sound echoed like music through the house. These brief flashes of joy gave him hope, even when the days felt long and burdensome. They were reminders that love persisted, even when structure and routine had faltered. During those months, he also began noticing the subtle changes in the children. They had become more independent in some ways, figuring out small tasks on their own, but the cost was clear in their mood and behavior. They were less patient, more prone to outbursts, and more clingy during rare moments of attention. He realized that what they needed was not just care, but a presence that could guide them, nurture them, and offer the stability that had been missing. And he knew deep down that he could not provide that alone, not while managing the demands of the ranch. Even as the days blended into one another, the rancher held on to hope. He told himself that eventually the right person would come along. He didn't know who or when, but he refused to give up on the idea that someone could restore balance to his home. Perhaps it would be a relative, a friend, or a stranger with the right mix of patience, skill, and kindness. He could only wait, continue his work, and do his best for his children in the meantime. And so the ranch continued on, 6 months of quiet struggle stretching into the unknown. The house remained a place of effort and endurance, where love existed, but was tested daily. The rancher worked tirelessly, the children waited for guidance, and the land itself seemed to watch over them all, silent and eternal. Though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear. The household had been yearning for help, for someone who could step in and bring the laughter, order, and warmth that had once been its lifeblood. Little did the rancher know that help was closer than he imagined, arriving in a way he could never have predicted. But for now, the days continued in their long, challenging rhythm, each one a test of patience, endurance, and hope. And somewhere on the horizon, a change was quietly approaching, a presence that would shift everything he thought he knew about raising his children, about family, and about the unexpected ways in which life could bring support exactly when it was needed most. The rancher had learned to expect the unexpected when it came to life on the ranch. Storms could arrive suddenly, fences could break, and cattle could wander off. But what he hadn't expected was the strange feeling that settled over him one morning. A quiet, persistent sense that something or someone was approaching. Something important. It was subtle at first, a shift in the air, a distant sound he couldn't place, but as the day went on, it became impossible to ignore. The children, too, seemed to notice it. They paused in the middle of their games and stared out the windows, their eyes wide with curiosity. Word had begun to reach the rancher from the neighbors, snippets of conversation and quiet hints that carried more weight than ordinary gossip. "Have you heard about the Apache woman who helps children?" one neighbor had asked casually, leaning on a fence post. "She's something else, not like anyone you've seen before. She doesn't need anyone to tell her what to do, and she has a way with kids that's different." The rancher raised an eyebrow at the remark, unsure what to make of it. He had heard of wise women, teachers, and caretakers in his life, but this description felt unusual, different. There was a certain weight in the way his neighbor had spoken, almost a reverence that made the rancher sit up straighter. He asked a few more questions, trying to gather details without seeming too desperate. He learned that she was known for her ability to calm restless children, for her gentle but firm approach to discipline, and for a kind of quiet wisdom that seemed to guide her every action. At first, the rancher dismissed the idea. He had managed for 6 months without help. He had survived, even if barely. Why should he seek assistance from someone so mysterious, someone he didn't even know? He was practical, logical, and independent. Asking for help felt like admitting failure, and he was not accustomed to admitting failure. But the seed had been planted. He couldn't shake the thought from his mind. The house was still too quiet, the children still restless, and the exhaustion he carried still heavy on his shoulders. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon and painted the sky in deep shades of orange and pink, the rancher sat on the porch, lost in thought. The children were inside, playing quietly for once, but their laughter was fragile, easily broken by minor frustrations. The wind whispered through the tall grass and carried with it a scent of earth and distant rain, and for the first time in months, the rancher allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to have help, someone who could walk through that door and bring order and warmth back into his home. The next few days passed slowly, each one filled with the usual struggles. The children bickered, spilled milk, and argued over toys. The rancher found himself snapping more than he wanted, though he immediately felt remorse afterward. He realized that he was at the end of his patience, and that perhaps the neighbors had been right. Maybe someone else was needed. Someone who could not only care for the children but restore the balance that had been lost. Then, one afternoon, a figure appeared on the horizon. At first, the rancher thought it was a traveler passing by, a lone rider moving along the dusty road. But as the figure came closer, he could see her clearly. She was tall and straight, with eyes that seemed to hold a depth of understanding and strength. Her steps were steady and confident, and she carried herself in a way that made it impossible to look away. She wore simple, practical clothing, and yet there was a presence about her that was commanding, without being loud. She was not like anyone the rancher had ever met. The children noticed her first. They pressed their faces to the windows, whispering to each other in excitement and curiosity. "Who is she, Dad?" one of them asked, tugging at the rancher's sleeve. He squinted at the approaching figure, feeling both cautious and hopeful. There was something about her that seemed familiar in an inexplicable way, as if she belonged to the land and yet did not belong to anyone. He could not have described it in words, but he felt it deep in his chest. This woman was different. When she reached the gate, she did not pause or hesitate. She walked in as though she had always been expected, her eyes scanning the ranch with calm assurance. The rancher stepped forward, unsure what to say. The woman's gaze met his, and she spoke with a voice that was clear, steady, and without hesitation. "I'm here now," she said simply. The words were not a question or a request. They were a statement of fact. There was no need for permission, no negotiation, no explanation. She had arrived, and her presence demanded acknowledgement. The rancher felt a strange mix of relief and surprise. Relief that help had come, and surprise that someone could enter his life so confidently, so fully, without preamble or hesitation. He nodded slowly, stepping aside to let her in. The children ran to meet her, their energy suddenly renewed by the arrival of this new presence. She knelt to their level, smiling gently, and they immediately responded to her warmth. The rancher watched, fascinated, as the tension that had been so heavy in the house seemed to lighten almost instantly. The children's laughter returned, natural and unforced, and for the first time in months, the rancher felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The woman did not rush to explain herself or her methods. She simply observed, quietly taking in the rhythm of the household, the behavior of the children, and the work that needed to be done. There was a stillness about her, a patience that seemed infinite, and yet she moved with purpose whenever action was required. She began to engage with the children, showing them how to play games, how to organize their toys, and how to help with small tasks around the house. Her approach was gentle but firm, never harsh, yet unmistakably authoritative. The rancher found himself stepping back, watching rather than instructing. At first it felt uncomfortable, almost as if he were relinquishing control, but he quickly realized that the children were responding in ways he had not been able to achieve. Their moods improved, their attention span increased, and even small disagreements were resolved more quickly. The house, once chaotic and tense, began to regain a sense of harmony that had been missing for half a year. As days turned into weeks, the rancher learned more about the woman's methods. She emphasized respect, routine, and understanding, teaching the children to communicate their feelings and needs without fear or frustration. She introduced them to simple rituals that brought comfort, a quiet reading time after lunch, a shared walk through the fields, and small chores that gave them a sense of responsibility and pride. Each day, the rancher observed not only the children's growth, but his own. He began to see the value in patience, the importance of listening, and the quiet strength that comes from steady, unwavering guidance. The neighbors began to notice the change too. When they passed by, they remarked on the children's cheerful demeanor and the renewed energy in the household. They asked the rancher how he had managed to turn things around so quickly. He could only smile, knowing that the answer was simple yet profound. The right person had arrived, and everything had shifted. Even the ranch hands commented on the difference. The rancher's evenings were no longer spent in exhaustion and frustration. Instead, he found himself enjoying quiet moments on the porch, watching the sunset with a sense of peace. The wind still whispered through the tall grass, but now the house behind him echoed with laughter, stories, and the sound of children playing. It was a reminder that sometimes help comes when it is needed most, and in ways that surpass expectation. The rancher began to understand that this woman was more than a caretaker. She was a teacher, a guide, and a presence that brought balance to their lives. Her arrival was not just a solution to a problem, it was a transformation. She had stepped into their world with confidence, wisdom, and a quiet authority, and in doing so, she had changed everything. The house was no longer a place of struggle, but a home filled with warmth, care, and connection. And so, the rancher, the children, and the mysterious Apache woman settled into a rhythm. Each day brought new lessons, laughter, and small victories. The challenges of the past 6 months began to feel distant, replaced by a sense of hope and stability. The rancher learned that accepting help was not weakness but strength, and that the right presence could transform even the most chaotic household into a place of harmony and joy. The arrival of the woman was more than a coincidence. It was a turning point. The rancher realized that life often brings unexpected gifts, and that sometimes the answer to a long struggle comes not through planning nor effort alone, but through the quiet arrival of someone who knows exactly what is needed and simply steps in to provide it. The Apache woman wasted no time settling into the rhythm of the ranch. From the moment she stepped through the door, she observed the house with careful eyes, noting the places where disorder had crept in during the months without a caretaker. She did not criticize, nor did she demand immediate change. Instead, she moved deliberately, taking each task and each child's need in stride, letting her quiet confidence set the pace. It was clear from the beginning that she knew exactly what she was doing, and the rancher quickly realized that he could not simply impose his own way of running things while she was around. The children were curious at first, their eyes wide and questions spilling out in every direction. "What's your name?" one asked, tugging at her sleeve.
"Where do you come from?" another wanted to know, leaning close. The woman smiled gently, kneeling to meet their gaze, and answered in soft, clear words.
She did not offer long explanations, nor did she overwhelm them with stories about herself. Instead, she focused on them, observing their gestures, listening to their words, and responding in ways that immediately made them feel understood. The children, who had been restless and anxious for months, were drawn to her calm and confident presence. Her first order of business was to bring structure back into the household. She began by introducing simple routines, things the children could easily follow. Breakfast was no longer rushed. It became a time for conversation, for sharing plans for the day, and for learning patience. The children learned to clear their plates, help set the table, and prepare simple items under her watchful guidance. She encouraged them to participate in the chores around the house and the ranch, not as punishment, but as a way to give them responsibility and pride in their contributions. The rancher watched these changes with a mix of awe and relief. He had spent months struggling to maintain control, and now he was beginning to see the difference that a patient, experienced presence could make. The children, once prone to bickering and tantrums, were calmer, more cooperative, and even joyful in small moments of shared accomplishment. The woman did not force them to behave, nor did she raise her voice in anger. Instead, she modeled patience, kindness, and gentle authority. The children responded, almost instinctively, because she treated them with respect while guiding them with consistency. Outside, she encouraged the children to explore the ranch with care and curiosity. She showed them how to watch the cattle, how to recognize different plants, and how to move quietly across the land without disturbing its natural balance. The children were fascinated, and for the first time in months, their energy was channeled into learning and discovery rather than chaos. Even the rancher found himself drawn into these activities, walking alongside her and the children, listening to her explanations, and discovering a newfound appreciation for the land he had tended for so long. One of the most striking things about the woman was her ability to balance discipline and freedom. She set boundaries clearly, but she also allowed the children to make choices within those limits. If they made mistakes, she used them as teaching moments rather than opportunities for scolding. When one child spilled water while carrying it to the table, she knelt beside them and said, "It's okay. Let's clean it up together and try again." The child learned responsibility without fear, and the rancher realized that this approach was far more effective than the harsh corrections he had occasionally resorted to in his exhaustion. As days turned into weeks, the children began to change in ways that were remarkable. They laughed more freely, shared their thoughts more openly, and even helped each other without being told. Their bond with the rancher deepened as well, because he was no longer the only adult trying to maintain order. He could engage with the children without constant stress, enjoying their presence rather than merely managing their behavior. The house, once tense and heavy with frustration, began to feel alive again. It was filled with warmth, laughter, and the comforting rhythm of daily life. The Apache woman also brought lessons that extended beyond the immediate needs of the household. She introduced the children to stories and traditions from her culture, teaching them about respect for the land, for animals, and for each other. She showed them that patience and observation were as valuable as action, and that understanding and kindness could solve problems far more effectively than force. The children were fascinated, asking questions and eagerly absorbing every lesson. The rancher, too, listened and learned, realizing that the wisdom she shared was not limited to children's behavior. It applied to life on the ranch, to work, and to relationships. Even the ranch hands noticed the changes. The children were more helpful, more cooperative, and more engaged in daily routines. Tasks that had been difficult or stressful were now completed with enthusiasm. The rancher found himself relying on her guidance more than he expected, not because he lacked strength or skill, but because her presence brought efficiency, calm, and balance to the household. She taught him that leadership could be gentle and firm at the same time, and that patience was often the most powerful tool of all. The bond between the rancher and the Apache woman grew slowly, rooted in mutual respect. He admired her confidence and skill, while she appreciated his willingness to observe, learn, and adapt. There was no need for words to explain their partnership. It was understood in the way she directed the children, the way he followed her guidance, and the way the household operated with newfound harmony. He realized that help did not diminish him. It enhanced his ability to be a father, a rancher, and a leader. At night, after the children were asleep, the rancher would sit on the porch and reflect on the day. The wind carried the scent of the earth, and the ranch was quiet. But inside the house, the presence of the Apache woman lingered in every corner. The children's laughter, the orderly rooms, and the calm energy she had introduced were reminders of how much had changed in such a short time. He realized that the arrival of the woman was not merely a solution to the problems of the household. It was a turning point in how he viewed family, responsibility, and support. The children began to confide in her in ways they had not in months. They spoke about their worries, their dreams, and their small frustrations. The woman listened with patience, offering gentle advice and encouragement, never dismissing their feelings. The rancher watched from a distance, amazed at how effortlessly she gained the children's trust. It was clear that her guidance was rooted in respect, understanding, and an innate ability to connect with young hearts. Even simple activities became lessons in growth. Gardening, cooking, and caring for the animals were opportunities for teaching responsibility, observation, and cooperation. The children learned to pay attention to details, to work together, and to take pride in their accomplishments. Each day brought small victories, and each victory strengthened their confidence and sense of belonging. The rancher marveled at how quickly the household had transformed, realizing that the presence of the Apache woman had brought not only order, but a deep sense of purpose and joy to their lives. Through it all, the woman never demanded recognition or praise. She worked quietly, focusing on the needs of the children and the household. Her methods were consistent, her guidance steady, and her presence reassuring. The rancher began to understand that her strength lay not in force or control, but in her ability to inspire trust, cooperation, and respect. She had arrived with a simple statement, "I'm here now," and in doing so, had quietly reshaped the lives of everyone in the household. The bond between the rancher and the children grew stronger as well. With the woman's guidance, he learned how to communicate more effectively, how to engage with their emotions, and how to provide the care and attention that had been missing. He discovered that love, patience, and consistency were far more powerful than authority alone. The children thrived under this new dynamic, and the rancher felt a renewed sense of purpose and pride. As weeks turned into months, the household settled into a comfortable rhythm. Each day began with routine and ended with calm reflection. The children were happier, more confident, and more engaged. The rancher was no longer overwhelmed, and the Apache woman had become an indispensable part of their lives. Her arrival had not simply solved problems, it had created an environment where everyone could grow, learn, and thrive together. The rancher often thought about the past 6 months without her. realizing how much strain had been placed on the household and on himself. He understood now that some challenges were simply too great to face alone, and that accepting help was not a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. The Apache woman had brought more than care and guidance. She had brought balance, understanding, and a quiet strength that transformed their lives. And so, life on the ranch continued, filled with laughter, learning, and shared effort. The children grew in confidence and happiness. The rancher grew in patience and wisdom, and the Apache woman's presence became the steady heartbeat of the household. What had begun as a simple statement, "I'm here now," had become the foundation for a home renewed, a family strengthened, and a ranch filled with warmth, harmony, and hope. Life on the ranch had begun to feel lighter, more balanced, but it was not without challenges. The Apache woman's presence had brought order and warmth to the household, yet the children were still growing, learning, and testing boundaries. She did not shy away from these moments, understanding that challenges were not obstacles to overcome, but opportunities to teach. The rancher watched closely, realizing that these lessons were as important for him as they were for the children. Each morning began with a calm routine. The children woke, washed, and helped prepare breakfast, while the Apache woman guided them with gentle encouragement. She insisted on small responsibilities, setting the table, feeding the animals, and caring for the house. The children approached these tasks with more care than ever before, though mistakes still happened. When a spilled bowl of cereal threatened to ruin the morning, she did not scold or complain. Instead, she smiled, knelt beside the child, and said, "It's okay. Let's fix this together." The child learned patience and problem solving while the rancher observed, slowly understanding the power of guidance over command. The rancher himself faced new lessons. He had grown used to handling physical work, livestock, and fences, but emotional guidance was different. The Apache woman often encouraged him to engage with the children in ways he had never tried before, asking their opinions, listening to their fears, and validating their feelings. At first, it felt strange to ask, "How do you feel about this?" instead of immediately correcting behavior. Yet, as days passed, he noticed a remarkable change. The children responded openly, shared their thoughts, and even sought his advice. The bond between father and children grew stronger, founded on trust and understanding rather than only authority. The woman also introduced the children to small lessons about responsibility beyond the household. They helped in the garden, planting seeds and learning to care for them daily. She taught them about patience, showing that growth, whether in plants, animals, or people, took time and careful attention. Each day, the children checked on their plants, noticing changes, and learning that persistence and care could produce beautiful results. The rancher watched quietly, amazed at how engaged they had become, and he felt a quiet gratitude toward the woman who had made this possible. Evenings were a time of reflection and learning. The woman encouraged the children to share their experiences, to speak about the best and hardest parts of their day. She asked questions that required thought and honesty, and she guided them gently when their answers were incomplete or uncertain. Slowly, the children began to articulate their feelings, understanding that mistakes were not failures, but lessons to grow from. The rancher began to join these conversations, sometimes awkwardly at first, but eventually with genuine interest and care. He realized that parenting was not just about rules, it was about connection, patience, and trust. Yet challenges still arose. Occasionally, the children's energy overflowed into arguments or mischief. They would resist chores or refuse to follow instructions. The Apache woman faced these moments with calm authority, never raising her voice in anger, but using firm boundaries to guide them. "You may feel frustrated," she would say, "but that does not give you permission to hurt someone or throw things." Let's find another way. The children, though initially resistant, learned to pause, reflect, and make better choices. The rancher noticed that the approach required consistency and patience, and he began applying similar methods himself, discovering that gentle guidance often worked far better than force. Beyond behavior, she also helped the children manage emotions they had not learned to express before. Fear, sadness, jealousy, and excitement were all acknowledged and discussed openly. She would sit with them quietly, letting them talk about their feelings without judgment, and teaching them how to respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. These lessons were subtle but powerful. Over time, the children became more empathetic, more aware of their own emotions, and better able to communicate their needs. The rancher observed this transformation with amazement, realizing that true growth was happening before his eyes. The Apache woman's wisdom extended beyond the household. She taught the children respect for the land and the animals that lived on it. She explained why fences needed care, why water had to be conserved, and how to observe the natural world with curiosity and thoughtfulness. The children became attuned to the rhythms of the ranch, the movements of the cattle, the signs of weather changes, and the beauty of the desert landscape. They learned to approach animals with calm confidence, understanding that trust and gentleness produced better results than force. The rancher, too, gained insight from these lessons, rediscovering a deeper connection to the land he had worked for years. At times, the rancher struggled with letting go of his old ways. He was used to making decisions quickly, relying on experience, and expecting obedience. Watching the Apache woman guide the children with patience and encouragement challenged him to slow down, to observe, and to consider alternative approaches. He realized that leadership could be collaborative, that respect and listening could achieve far more than authority alone. These lessons were not easy to internalize, but over time he began to embrace them, noticing the positive changes in both his children and himself. The children also faced personal challenges, learning new responsibilities, managing their emotions, and adjusting to routines required effort. Sometimes they felt frustrated or overwhelmed, but the Apache woman was always there to guide them through. She never solved their problems for them, but instead offered tools, encouragement, and gentle direction. Each challenge became an opportunity for growth, and each small victory built confidence and resilience. The rancher noticed that his children were becoming stronger, not just in skill, but in character. Family meals became an important part of the daily rhythm. The Apache woman encouraged the children to participate in cooking, setting the table, and cleaning afterward. She showed them that collaboration, patience, and kindness could make even ordinary tasks meaningful. The rancher joined in these activities, sometimes clumsily, but always with sincerity. Together, they learned to work as a team, to communicate respectfully, and to celebrate the small accomplishments that came from shared effort. These moments, once ordinary, became treasured opportunities to connect and grow together. The woman also taught the children the importance of observation and reflection. They learned to notice details, the way the sun lit the horizon at different times of day, the subtle changes in the cattle's behavior, and the growth of plants in the garden. She explained that careful observation helped them understand the world, make better decisions, and appreciate life more fully. The children embraced these lessons eagerly, and the rancher found himself reflecting alongside them, learning to slow down and notice things he had taken for granted. Through all these lessons, the Apache woman remained steady, calm, and consistent. She was not only a guide for the children, but a mentor for the rancher as well. Her presence taught him that patience, understanding, and respect could transform a household, that challenges were opportunities for growth, and that love could be expressed through guidance and care as much as through affection alone. The rancher realized that he had learned more about parenting in a few months with her than he had in years of trying alone. As the days passed, the bond between the rancher, the children, and the Apache woman deepened. Trust was established, respect was mutual, and warmth filled the house. The challenges they faced became opportunities for learning, and the household grew stronger with each passing day. The children became more responsible, the rancher more patient, and the home more harmonious. It was a transformation born of understanding, guidance, and consistent care. By the end of this season, the rancher knew that the Apache woman's presence had changed everything. She had not only brought order and care, but had also taught the family to approach life differently, with patience, empathy, and respect. The children were thriving, confident, and happy. The rancher felt stronger, wiser, and more connected to his family. And the house, once heavy with tension and disorder, now echoed with laughter, learning, and love. Through all the lessons, the challenges, and the daily rhythms, one truth had become clear. Life on the ranch was no longer simply about survival or work. It was about growth, connection, and understanding. The Apache woman had come quietly with simple words, "I'm here now." And yet her influence had been profound. She had transformed a household in need into a family united, teaching lessons that would last far beyond the months she spent with them. The rancher reflected often on the changes he had witnessed. He realized that accepting help did not diminish his strength but enhanced it. He understood that challenges were not always meant to be faced alone, and that wisdom could arrive in the form of someone willing to guide with patience, respect, and love. The Apache woman had shown him the power of steady, consistent care and the importance of nurturing not just with hands, but with heart and mind. Life continued on the ranch, steady and vibrant. The children grew in skill, confidence, and empathy. The rancher grew in patience, understanding, and leadership. And the Apache woman, with quiet strength and unwavering guidance, remained the heart of the household, a reminder that challenges, when met with wisdom and care, could become opportunities for transformation and growth. The months had passed quickly, though the rancher could scarcely remember how fast. Life on the ranch had been transformed. Where there had once been chaos, exhaustion, and tension, there was now laughter, routine, and warmth. The children had grown in confidence, responsibility, and understanding. They no longer flitted from task to task with frustration, but engaged with care, patience, and curiosity. Their little victories, setting the table without reminders, helping in the garden, or calming each other during arguments, were celebrated with quiet pride. And through it all, the Apache woman remained a steady, guiding presence, watching, teaching, and nurturing with patience that seemed limitless. The rancher often reflected on how much had changed since the first day she arrived. He remembered the 6 months before, when the house had felt heavy and quiet, when he had struggled to manage both the ranch and his children. Back then, every day had been a challenge, and every task had felt like an uphill battle. Now, the atmosphere of the household was completely different. The children laughed freely, the house was orderly, and the daily routines flowed smoothly. The transformation was not just in the children, it was in him as well. He had learned lessons that went beyond chores and discipline. He had learned to listen. He had learned to observe. He had learned that patience could achieve far more than force, and that understanding could heal tensions that authority alone could not. The Apache woman had shown him how to lead without domination, how to guide without anger, and how to nurture without losing his own identity. For the first time, he felt that he was truly part of a team with the children, not just someone who gave orders and expected obedience. The woman also taught the children lessons that would last a lifetime. She encouraged them to think for themselves, to act with responsibility, and to treat the land, the animals, and each other with respect. She explained that mistakes were not failures, but opportunities to learn. If one of the children spilled water while feeding the animals, she would not scold them, but would gently help them understand what went wrong and how to fix it. Through her guidance, the children developed confidence, resilience, and empathy. Even the small routines of the ranch were transformed by her presence. Breakfast became a time of calm conversation and gentle guidance. The chores of the day were approached with careful attention and teamwork. The garden thrived under the children's care. Each plant nurtured and watched for signs of growth. Animals were tended with patience and respect, and the rancher himself felt a renewed sense of connection to the land he had worked for so long. Everything that had once seemed burdensome now had meaning and rhythm. Yet the Apache woman did not only guide the children through tasks, she also guided them through life's lessons. She taught them about honesty, responsibility, and empathy. She explained why it was important to care for each other, to speak kindly, and to listen thoughtfully. She showed them how to manage emotions, how to communicate needs, and how to approach challenges with courage and patience. The children began to think before acting, to consider how their actions affected others, and to help each other without being asked. The rancher noticed these changes with awe. He watched as his children developed into thoughtful, responsible, and caring individuals. He realized that the Apache woman had not only brought order to the house, but had also nurtured the growth of character in the children. Their laughter was more joyful, their conversations more meaningful, and their bond with him stronger than ever before. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, understanding that her arrival had been more than a solution to a problem. It had been a gift that reshaped their lives. Even the ranch hands began to notice the difference. The children helped more willingly, the house ran more smoothly, and the rancher himself carried a sense of calm authority that had been missing. The lessons imparted by the Apache woman were evident not only in the household but also in the overall atmosphere of the ranch. Life, which had once felt heavy and strained, now flowed with purpose, connection, and harmony. The rancher also realized that he had grown in ways he had never expected. He had learned to step back and observe, to listen before acting, and to guide without dominating. He had discovered that patience and understanding were just as powerful as strength and skill. He felt closer to his children than he had ever been, sharing in their small victories, their laughter, and their growth. And he understood that the lessons of the Apache woman were not limited to the children. They applied to every aspect of life, from work to relationships, and even to his connection with the land itself. As the season progressed, the bond between the rancher, the children, and the Apache woman deepened. They became a family in the truest sense, united by trust, respect, and care. Challenges were met with patience and guidance, mistakes were treated as learning opportunities, and successes were celebrated with quiet pride. The house was no longer a place of tension, but a home filled with warmth, laughter, and love. Then came the day the Apache woman spoke of her journey onward. She had arrived quietly with no fanfare, and her presence had reshaped their lives in ways they could not have imagined. Now, she told them it was time to continue her own path. The children, now more confident and secure, understood the significance of her words. The rancher felt a pang of sadness at the thought of losing such a guiding presence. Yet he also felt gratitude for everything she had done. Before leaving, she gathered the children and the rancher together. She reminded them of the lessons they had learned, the importance of patience, responsibility, empathy, and care. She told them to continue working together, to listen to each other, and to approach life with courage and kindness. Her voice was calm but firm, leaving a lasting impression that would guide them long after her departure. The farewell was quiet and heartfelt. The children hugged her, expressing gratitude in small, earnest ways. The rancher shook her hand, acknowledging not only her guidance but the transformation she had brought to their lives. As she walked away, her presence remained, echoing in the laughter of the children, the routines of the household, and the calm strength the rancher had gained. In the days that followed, the household continued to thrive. The lessons imparted by the Apache woman were embedded in their daily lives. The children continued their routines, approached challenges thoughtfully, and nurtured their bond with their father. The rancher applied the principles he had learned, guiding with patience, observing carefully, and encouraging rather than commanding. The home was harmonious, and the ranch itself seemed to hum with renewed energy. The rancher often reflected on the months that had passed. He realized that the challenges he had faced were not obstacles to endure alone, but opportunities to learn, grow, and embrace support when it arrived. The Apache woman's presence had been a catalyst for change, teaching lessons far beyond childcare. She had shown him the importance of patience, empathy, guidance, and connection. The family had been transformed, stronger, wiser, and closer than ever before. Even in the quiet moments, the rancher felt the woman's influence. When he watched the children play, worked alongside them in the garden, or prepared meals together, he recognized the lessons she had taught them. Her guidance had created a ripple effect, shaping not only their behavior, but their understanding of the world. The rancher realized that the impact of her presence would last a lifetime, in the hearts and minds of the children, and in his own approach to life. The children, too, carried her lessons forward. They approached tasks with care, handled mistakes with patience, and treated each other and the animals with respect. They had grown confident, thoughtful, and responsible, able to navigate challenges with the tools and understanding the Apache woman had given them. The rancher watched them with pride, knowing that the foundation she had laid would support their growth for years to come. In the end, the rancher understood that life is rarely simple. Challenges will arise, and moments of struggle are inevitable. But with patience, guidance, and support, even the most difficult situations can lead to growth and transformation. The Apache woman had taught them that lessons often arrive in unexpected ways, and that true strength comes not from facing challenges alone, but from embracing wisdom and guidance when it appears. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink, the rancher stood on the porch, watching his children play in the yard. The house was full of warmth and laughter. The land, which he had worked so long to care for, seemed alive with energy, and in that moment he understood fully the gift they had been given. The Apache woman had arrived quietly, spoken a few simple words, and changed their lives forever. Her influence would remain, not just in the household or on the ranch, but in the hearts of the children and in the way the rancher approached life. He knew that when challenges arose, when frustration threatened, and when the path seemed unclear, the lessons of patience, understanding, and care would guide them, and for that he was profoundly grateful. Life continued, steady and joyful. The household thrived. The children grew with confidence and responsibility. The rancher became a father stronger in patience, wisdom, and love. And though the Apache woman had moved on, her presence lingered in every routine, every lesson, and every moment of connection. What had begun as a simple statement, "I'm here now," had become a lasting gift, one that would shape the lives of this family forever.